It's your boy Nova Z to ENT coming back with another one. Eventually, I hope to be famous enough to stop having to say my name at the beginning of videos. But as for right now, it's your boy Nova Z to ENT coming in. Gonna react to FD Signifier. I know at some point if I ever meet him, he's gonna call me the cooniest of coons. But I love his content. I job with it. You know, obviously if he goes through his comments on a lot of his videos, it's gonna be me not agreeing with the way he words things, and that's simply because, like, just to kind of get this out of the way, black leftist, you know, like he's cool on BreadTube. He's big in there. He's caking up, getting his bread, and I love that and I applaud that. I was following when he had 100,000 subscribers on his original YouTube channel, right? But when some and I don't like when people don't critique their own side in the same way, not with the same veracity. Don't get me wrong. Like, you don't critique outside of your house the same way you critique inside your house. Don't get me wrong, but he had a great video with this one Latino leftist who actually called him out about all the things that I say. Like, he said, one of the FD Signifier's stances is that he doesn't think he should engage with people that he doesn't agree with in the first place. He lets his essays do the talking, which I think is okay, but it is cowardly. Like, if you're confident in your position, the way you live life and your stances, you should be comfortable talking, like, not just like talking like debates. He said he doesn't really like debates, but he doesn't make videos on people specifically, just on things a lot of the time. But he has some where he talks about specific people when they get big enough. But I don't think he makes videos on people small enough who would interact with that. But that's just my opinion, right? But the other thing he does is that he doesn't critique the hypocrisy of people on the left in the same way. Everybody knows Hassan Piker, you know, for the most part, and Hassan, he does the false equivalency, not FD, when it comes to Hassan, that people on the right do when it comes to atrocities, right? Like, I'm gonna give you an example. You know, he'll use the people think socialism is when government does thing. When people say, like, Hassan makes a bunch of money touting socialist rhetoric, and then somebody asked him a really good question and said, "How much of your company do your editors own? How much of your company do the people you employ own? Do they have direct ownership of what you produce?" And instead of being honest and he's saying, like, "No, I pay them a fair wage," he touts that the means of production, like people, co-ops and things of that nature, people should have access and ownership of things they produce. Like, they don't get residual royalties. Like, he doesn't keep track of everybody who's helped him in a video and then perpetually pay them out for the amount of money he makes per video. I don't even know if YouTube breaks it down that way, right? It might, right? But he doesn't do that. And instead of confronting that question, he just goes, "Oh, socialism is when government does thing." And when the FD gets talked to about it, and I have to go. I know like, right here's the problem. Right, he was gonna say, "Show me the exact video." Man, it was so long ago when he did that. But he said that one of his things is, like, Hassan does so much good for the left, it's not worth it to him to pressure him on hypocrisies. And I don't like that part about it. But everything else, man, I love his content. I love to see when black men succeed, especially because one of the principles that I agree with him on is that we live in a system that's adversarial to most poor people, and a lot of black people are poor, and we should do our best to change the system. And shoot, you got to take care of your family while doing it. He makes a bag, and I'm sure he would at some point say he much more enjoys being rich than he does being poor because he's able to do his passions as his job. Now, if he didn't, then we'd have a problem, right? Then I'd say, like, okay, now you're being a double hypocrite. We got to figure this out. We got to talk about it. I got to get my side. It just motivates me to try to get my level up so I'm able to talk to him on an even playing field, because that is a question I have for him. I'm sure he enjoys being able to take care of his family in a much better way and do what he's passionate about, because he's a teacher, right? He's teaching right now. He's teaching all of us, and he's getting to do that and make more money than any teacher will ever make, right? But he's made this video on why Dave Chapelle thinks we're stupid, and I saw a little bit of it at work, but I'm gonna really deep dive into it, you know, here, and let him kind of explain it. Let's go ahead. Hey, talk to us. Talk to us,
A
FD.
few weeks back, probably as of now, on a night where people witnessed the classic, beautiful image of a gifted black boxer breaking the jaw of an obnoxious symbol of white privilege. the world was surprised with a brand new special from one Dave Chapelle in the aftermath. Chapelle being the legendary comedian who has over recent years seen his universal love slowly turn into controversial appreciation from a distance. I've made a few videos about Dave over the years, first in response to his controversial special The Closer a few years back when he made failed attempts to defend his lazy use of trans jokes. I also engaged with Dave probably a year ago after he released The Dreamer, mostly just explaining why my take on Dave and his weak defense of his trans jokes has aged incredibly well.
I agree with him. Like one of the things I said to my buddies is like, man, Dave's got a he. I get it, sales, right? Like, you know, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try. I'm making a multiverse of connective tissue, right? Like in Demion TV, he's one of those guys who thinks everything's woke. Everything with any mixed race people or black people or fat women is woke. And he made a video, you know, that I agree with, where it's like, um, you know, things can go too far. Um, but one of the things that, you know, so you know, I'm on that on both sides of the aisle with this is that Dave's how to link it to Endymion, right? Is that Dave makes trans jokes because they sell. Just be honest, right? But Endymion knows that Diablo and EA and stuff are going to keep making slop games because they sell. We don't play them, right? I bought new college football, but I hadn't bought a football game since the last college football because I'm not buying Madden anymore. I'm not supporting it, but I do like college football. But I'll never buy another college football game after the one I bought because there's no need. I got the one. They'll never change it. They'll never iterate. They'll take some things out and put some things back in the next year. I'm not falling for it. But I got a buddy who religiously every year will buy Madden NCAA. He doesn't care if it gets worse or better because that's what he enjoys. He's the common man. There are more people who will buy the next Call of Duty because it has a new number on it than people who require that Call of Duty to be good. And the only thing we can do is shop with our dollars. I can go and support any other game. There's thousands of games, thousands of indie developers. I would rather support them and just play my old college football, play my FIFA 2017 religiously because, you know, we know what sells. I don't want to be a part of what sells for them. I want to be a part of what I'm passionate about. Dave is telling old stale trans jokes because it's making them a bag.
However, today, after watching Dave's most recent special, The Unstoppable, I realized there are some flaws in the way I've spoken about Dave in these last few years. I was really being too nice to Dave. Dave Chapelle is one of the greatest comedians of all time, one of the few comedians from the 90s who can still tell good jokes halfway through the 2020s. This is not up for debate. I want to start there just to level set. The Unstoppable isn't Dave's best work, but that doesn't mean it's not funny. It suffers from being compared to Dave's early work nearly 30 years ago that still holds up to this day. I had a few good laughs, but nothing compared to any of that stuff from 30 years ago, let alone some of his other work on Netflix. I say all of this to undermine anybody new coming here that thinks I'm here to cancel Dave or to undermine the talent that Dave has, although he will probably get some flack for his anti-Israel statements. I'll come back to that. My goal in this video isn't to get you to stop enjoying Dave's work or to imagine a world where what I have to say will change the way that people regard Dave. I'm just presenting a critique of Dave in this special to enrich your own thinking and maybe entertain you. My goal is for you to reevaluate your perception of what Dave Chapelle is and has been doing in his comedy. Even if you decide to continue to support and celebrate him, which is your prerogative, at least you'll be better informed and less easily manipulated about what's actually being happened. Because talented, rich people are not cancelable unless they do some type of heinous sex crime, and even then, it's a toss-up. So
I didn't mean to stop it there because I was going to make a comment on that part. He's right. Like once you get to a certain level of money, man, you can do whatever you want to do. Look at our president, right? But you know, one of the things I will say about FD's content from a couple of years ago to now, oh man, he's so much better at presenting like it, he used to speak in absolute. I know I say that a lot, but like he used to speak in absolutes where only his opinion was right, and this is why you guys are coons if you like this or whatever. But I love the way he's presenting this now, and I get it. Like he's trying to make it more palatable for the wide audience. But I do think if you're in a marketing, YouTube is marketing, right? And he's doing a much better job of saying like, look, here's what I think. I think you should think what I think. But at least if you still think what you think after this, it'll be harder for you to fall into the trap of just shoveling it down your throat without thinking. You know, I love that.
stand up front. Dave Chapelle has not and will not lose a penny for anything I or anyone else has said. I'm just engaging with ideas, so please don't throw that out there as a deflection or whataboutism, all right? Don't waste your time with the he's entitled to his opinion defense, because whenever you say that, you're basically just admitting that you don't have an argument to go against what's being said, so you're arguing for the validity of saying something, which is stupid. But it is what it is. I say all this to say, feel free to click away if you don't want your perception to be challenged. And if you decide to stay and engage with that, don't be a fucking baby in my comments, all right? So to explain what I'm sure will be an inflammatory title for this video, let's look at this old joke from Dave Chapelle.
I'll say anything, nigga. I've done commercials for Coke and Pepsi. I don't give a fuck what comes out of my mouth. I just say what it takes. Whatever it takes, that's what I'm saying.
I want to shout out to the brothers at Waving the Red Flag podcast. We talked about this in their podcast, maybe like the night after it came out. But this joke from like 20 years ago is honestly the most telling and clarifying joke about Dave that he's ever given the world. Dave Chapelle is full of shit. He's a bullshitter. And the thing that I need to fully engage with is that Dave knows he's a bullshitter, but he also knows that most of us don't know he's a bullshitter.
Now, I don't agree with that. I agree with, like, comics tell stories. That's why you can steal jokes. You wouldn't be able to steal jokes if they weren't bullshitting you in some respect. Like, if they weren't making up a story and for you to enjoy, it'd be harder to steal jokes, right? Like, if I told a joke about the black experience and then, Joe Rogan told that same joke, people would go like, hey, well, you don't have that experience or whatever, right? But normally people are telling vague, semi-true stories or exaggerated stories. I don't think that Dave knows we don't know. I just think that Dave understands that the average person doesn't care. I'm always gonna link this back to, I'm a Cardinals fan, and I believe that in my lifetime the Cardinals will win the Super Bowl. Who knows, man? Like, am I confident? No, but I believe they will. There's a lot of problems that we have, but I have blind faith that for the next 40 years that I'm alive or whatever, they're going to get at least one Super Bowl in my lifetime. And that blind faith is enough for me. Dave just is counting on the fact that the average layperson is using his content as escapism. I don't think he's going like, oh, I'm going to get them. They don't know that I'm a shill. No, they know. They just know that they're in your story. They believe in, they're suspending their disbelief to hear your joke,
Fair to him, he's tried to tell us numerous times, right? But despite that, people still hold him up as a truth teller, as the opposite of being full of shit, when in reality, his main focus has always been bullshitting to get his money. Dave, as he says in his special, is a capitalist, and as any highly talented comedian, bullshitting is their job. So I kind of get it. But what I want to do here is make sure that from here on, if you've watched this video, that you get it too, so you can stop treating Dave with a reverence he does not deserve. I've already talked at length about the trans jokes and how they're lazy and poorly thought out, along with being offensive, so I'm not gonna rehash that. But again, I tended to think that maybe like most people, Dave just didn't know how off he was with the trans jokes. So his offensive jokes could be interpreted as mistakes of understanding. However, now it's very clear and more egregious that Dave knows he's doing things that he deserves criticism for. He just doesn't care, but he does care enough to not like being criticized. Dave is not unaware of how harmful what he's saying and doing is, and if his previous behavior and ideological positions are to be taken seriously, he should know what he knows that he acts like he doesn't know. Does that make sense? To clarify, around halfway through this special, Dave talks about how he's been criticized for going to the Riyadh festival in Saudi Arabia, and he has this to say.
I've been getting a lot of grief, again, because I did a comedy festival in Saudi Arabia. They said, well, Saudi Arabia killed a journalist, and rest in peace, Jamal Khashoggi. I'm sorry that he got murdered in such a heinous. Also, Israel's killed 240 journalists in the last 3 months. So I didn't know y'all was still counting.
So this is a classic whataboutism, and I know for a fact that I need to explain it, so sit tight for a second.
Okay, I mean, he's going to explain exactly this, but I am going to, exposing hypocrisy does not alleviate your own, right? Like, obviously there's levels of hypocrisy, right? But I'm gonna liken it to, I'm gonna give y'all a good example, like before he speaks on this, right? I might take his example or whatever, but like I said, I kind of watched this, but if it's not performing in Saudi Arabia that's the problem. It's that the Saudi Arabian government funded this thing. It's like, if you perform at a comedy show in America, ain't nothing wrong with that, man. That's what you're doing. But if you perform for the president and you don't agree with what he does, that's when, hey, come on, like, you can't be supported because you're taking a bag against your own morals, right? Like, Trump's building that giant ballroom, $300 million while we all starve or whatever. Anybody who goes to perform there, because they're gonna have performances, right, are people you can't trust to be in the best interest of the average American. Just like anybody who's, now, don't get me wrong, I told you guys right now, I'm a shield. I'd go and take this money. Some of these people got millions for the bag. I'd go take millions for the bag and perform for some travesties. You feel what I'm saying? I'm not above that, right? But if you do perform at this show, you are performing directly for the people who are trying. I'm guarantee you, you have to go in there and say, like, hey, if you say anything about the government, we're gonna hold you contempt. Our laws work differently here, whatever. So they probably got all of that paperwork done, you know, knowing that they can't say those things. It would be like coming here and you'd be like, hey, don't mention all the felonies that I have when you perform on stage, and you sign that knowing that that's some of your material you might have had, and now it's off limits. As a comic, you're not supposed to have things off limits, So I'm assuming where he's going with the hypocrisy of, like, yeah, one person did a thing and one person did a thing, but we're not talking about these two. We're talking about you.
Riyadh Comedy Festival was a special event held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and it was a controversial and in many ways disappointing example as to why you should believe Dave's words in that snippet I showed earlier, because it shows that Dave, much like most celebrities, is only as principled as he is well paid. Many of you may not know this, but Saudi Arabia is not a great place for a multitude of reasons. They've participated in more than a few human atrocities over the years. They have extremely repressive laws around women and sexuality that are legitimately more oppressive than other Muslim nations and not actually rooted in a true practice of Islam. Their government is corrupt and despotic. Dave mentions how they murdered a journalist a few years back for criticizing the royal family. Yes, but that's not where this begins or ends, and again, Dave knows this. Saudi Arabia also has what essentially amounts to legal slavery right now in 2025, 2026, probably when you're watching this. They have an estimated 700,000 plus people in a variety of exploitative conditions, which amount to slavery, many of which are Africans. Speaking of Africa, the Saudi government has treated them much like America has treated its imperial neo-colonies, which includes an influx of Ethiopians who often immigrate to Saudi Arabia because of the things Saudi Arabia is doing in East Africa, and those Ethiopians were subject to a mass killing just a couple of years ago. Saudi Arabia is also currently funding one half of the Sudanese civil war that's creating a massive humanitarian crisis in Africa. I've had a few people point out that Saudi Arabia is not explicitly funding the more brutal Rapid Support or RSF forces, which is true, but they're still greatly responsible for the neocolonial state of Sudan, and they are engaged in what amounts to a proxy war with them and the United Arab Emirates, who are allegedly funding the RSF. And this is all with the goal of controlling the resources of Sudan, not supporting the self-determination of Sudan or anything that's actually helpful to Africans. I am glossing over a lot. Global politics is not my bag. Feel free to elaborate or correct me in the comments. I'm working on something to fix my lack of understanding there, but here's the point. Dave pointing out how awful America is with its support of Israel or legacy of empire does not make it the same, does not make it any less bad that he went there to perform. This wasn't like Dave had a homie with the comedy club in Saudi Arabia and he went there for a private event. He performed for those in power to whitewash what they're really doing in that country and abroad. And
this is gonna sound nitpicky, but I don't like that he used whitewash there. Like, white people aren't the default in Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure how you would word that, brown wash or whatever. I know it's wild for me to take that entire thing in that, but y'all heard what I said. Like, I was figuring that's pretty much where he was gonna go with it. Because when you start whatabouting things, you start allowing things that you wouldn't allow in any other case but that somebody else. Like, you wouldn't steal normally, but because Walmart steals time from their employees, you could justify stealing from Walmart. Now, I mean, I'm not saying you can or can't, but I'm saying that you'll start allowing more lines to be crossed when you look at who's crossed the most lines. That's what he's getting at here.
Much like with every other person that is forced to perform there, I guarantee Dave had to sign a contract to censor himself to not criticize the Saudi government or say anything bad about what they're doing. Which is something, if you let Dave tell you, he would never do, because freedom of speech and his ability to say what he wants is so important to him. But it's not if the check is right. It's a complete betrayal of what many perceive Dave to stand for. It's the definition of selling out. Performing at this festival at the behest of the Saudi government for their king and their prince or whatever would be like somebody from Saudi Arabia coming here to perform for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump made him promise not to talk about racism or issues with queer people or ICE terrorizing the cities and all kinds of shit. The same stuff he's complaining about with Donald Trump, if he were a Saudi Arabian person coming here, they'll be like, I don't see anything wrong happening in DC. That's who Dave Chapelle is right now, and I need people to recognize that. And Dave is...
Hey, shout out Asmongold on that. You know, a couple months ago, he said, like, people who immigrate here should lose their freedom of speech until they become citizens, because they're not subject to the same laws we have. But now that people can't speak out against what's going on in Israel, he's saying, like, no, we should want to be in trouble and get in trouble, because we should be able to speak about against these things. Like, you know, you got to pick a side, you know, but it's not consistency. It's not about consistency with these kind of people. It's about power and how much leverage you can have. And I think that's what he's getting at with Dave, right? Like, but I can tell you right now, he already told you who it is. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. Like, if they offered me $300,000 to go over there, man, I could solve a lot of problems with that. That's all my debt, you know, so I can get that done. You know, my kids will be taken care of. So I get it, man.
Literally joking about his role in...
But then you'd also have to ask, how much is too much? How rich does Dave need to be before he stops wanting more? Like, you know,
that process, and how well they paid him to tap dance for those people.
Every article said the comedians hoard themselves out to a dictator, but all the articles have my picture on it. And you know what? I can't even get mad, because you know, to be fair, I did make more money than all of those comedians. You know what my new job is? I sit by the phone and wait for them Arabs to call me. Can I help you guys?
When Dave does the whataboutism comparing them to the U.S. or Israel, it's some bullshit, and he knows it. But he knows most of y'all don't know this. He knows he can tell a few jokes, bring up something that everyone would be on his side about, which is the genocide in Gaza, points at a shitbird nobody likes like Bill Maher, and then moves on as if he's really addressed the issue, but he hasn't. There really is no excuse for Dave performing over there except for him just saying, look, I wanted the money and I'm greedy. And he's kind of said that, just not fully. What's clear now, going back to the closer where Dave famously promised he wouldn't make any more trans jokes. Remember that? Remember when Dave Chapelle said, no more trans jokes until we're all on one accord? This nigga. It shows that Dave doesn't have a lot of respect for his audience, because he knows at the end of the day, enough people will either be misinformed or not care about him talking out his ass without consequence. When Dave says it's easier to talk in Saudi Arabia, he really means it's easier for him. And that's only because he has no desire to criticize the fact that the people that cut that check are also murdering Africans.
Now, I will have to say, why is that Dave's responsibility? This is actually where I think the left and the right kind of get along. But the right is more grandiose in what they think, right? They think like Michael Knowles, which again I'm weaving it, you know, when he was talking to Clavicular, he said it is his prerogative to spread the gospel. He is called to do that. Because one of my questions I always have for people is, man, if somebody's getting gay married, I don't like the term, like if it's just gay people getting married, but for the sake of this conversation, if somebody's getting gay married in a town over, what are you worried about in your town? And Michael Knowles would be under the impression that the fact that it even exists in the world means that he has not done his job, and he cannot rest until he feels complete and whole, right? You know, but the left also has the same thing, right? But they don't have internal locus. They think of it as external locus. They think it is everyone's job to spread their ideology and not just them. Dave told you already, I want a bigger bag. If the bag gets bigger, I can compromise my morals. And FD is mad that he is doing that, because he's in a position that if FD were in, he wouldn't compromise those morals. It's not Dave's problem to handle your ideology, right? I get what he's saying, like you would like him to. I would like people to think the way I think for the most part, but it's not his explicit job to do things that you would like him to do.
African immigrants and funding a genocide in Sudan. And I bet he doesn't like that. In fact, I'd argue that he probably doesn't even agree with the treatment of gay people in Saudi Arabia, but
I don't give a fuck what comes out of my mouth. I just say what it takes. Whatever it takes, that's what I'm saying.
And I wouldn't be so bothered if it weren't for the mythological role that Dave plays in black culture as some type of righteous truth teller. I don't think Dave lies per se, right? But as I said in my video, he only tells half truths. He says the part people will appreciate and leaves out the parts where he's taking blood money or doing things he knows he shouldn't be doing to offend folks because he knows he can get away with it. And that's what really frustrates me about certain black folks right now beyond Dave Chapelle. We are severely lacking in our capacity to analyze a situation beyond a racial frame. I understandably feel the need to protect, uplift, and celebrate our icons and luminaries who make great art and comedy and music, much like all of us are rooting for Anthony Joshua to knock out Jake Paul or whichever Paul brother that is in that fight. That I'm still with. But if Anthony Joshua comes out and does some fuck shit about black people, then it's fuck Anthony Joshua until he apologizes for the shit. We really gotta be recognizing when we're being played, when folks are using their connection to blackness to avoid substantive criticism, because it happens all the time and so many of us keep letting these Negroes get away with it. If people talked about Dave Chapelle the way they do Kevin Hart, who also performed at the festival, because of course he did, I wouldn't even bother talking about it because nobody's running around saying Kevin Hart is some type of radical truth teller. In fact, I probably wouldn't even say anything about Dave if he hadn't put out this half-ass horrible whataboutism of an excuse. If he just did a special and not even addressed it, I'd have maybe made a post, but like, I wouldn't think to break it down even further because at least that's an acknowledgement that he knows he was wrong and doesn't want to engage in it. But because Dave is on this pedestal, I feel the need to make sure people understand why they need to knock him off for the longest.
Right. So you see what I said a couple minutes ago? FD does not feel like he can sleep at night if he's not pushing his ideology on other people, and Dave isn't accepting of the way he thinks. So he's like, I gotta make sure that, if he had said nothing, which I agree with, I'm actually like I said, don't take what I'm saying as I don't think that he's where he should be and he's fighting for his beliefs. I'm saying it is interesting that he's mad that Dave isn't holding the ideology he does to the same standard. And he said he would have rather he said nothing than lie to people. I don't believe Dave is lying. That's what he's saying. He's saying like Dave is like, I am such a capitalist. Whatever I say, it's my problem with the Hodge twins. Like they're idiots, right? But they are at least honest in the fact that they will do anything that gets them a bag, and whether that be talk about their own people or without any knowledge of what's going on, or tap dance for the white man in a room full, blackface it up themselves to make those people happy. They've told you what it is. He has a sense of moral, but the moral can be outbid by his pockets, and you got to respect that. I mean, you don't have to respect that, but FD's railing against what he already knows.
Dave has done little to nothing to agitate against power or the systems that harm us, even in his comedy. We got a few Charlie Kirk jokes, but they were pulled punches if you ask me. And if you think about it, we haven't heard hardly anything in terms of our political reality from Dave for almost 10 years of Trump and Biden and Trump again. He talks about it at the end of this video, but considering where he really stands, I just can't follow him there. I just wish folks would expect and demand more from people we proclaim to be powerful thinkers. The bar is too low right now, and Dave himself is proof. I get it. I was there when the story broke that Dave left the Chapelle show and went to get his mind right in Africa, leaving $30 million on the table and sacrificing his show, allegedly off the principle of holding on to his integrity as a black man. That was an amazing and inspiring moment to witness, and I still find that story inspiring, but that was 20 years ago. Barack Obama was about to be president, Kanye West was still dating black women, and cell phones chirped. The preceding years have not been kind to Dave's principles. It's hard to believe that the same man who fled to Africa just came back from Saudi Arabia. But here we are. It's still perfectly fine to find Dave's comedy enjoyable. I laughed several times, although not as much as other specials. Dave is not responsible for the system he participates in. We all have to make compromises at different times because that's the reality of the situation. But there's compromising and then there's transgressing. And I don't know about y'all, but to me, performing for a government that's committing a genocide in Africa is a transgression. I don't know, maybe I'm weird for that shit. But I don't know Dave. Dave is only accountable to his community and his own conscience and his family. But I know that my conscience and my community will probably look elsewhere for real truth-telling and righteous behavior, because Dave hasn't shown that to me for a while now. I'm FD Signifier, and this has been Light Work.
Excellent video. there's something I wanted to touch on. I might make a whole video about this. Like, this is inspiring me, you know, to kind of to get in this but something he said that we need to demand more people we see as visionaries. The burden of being black. This is one of the things I always tell white people that like they don't realize that they get to be white people get to do whatever they're doing at the time as just a regular human being. And let me like quantify. Let me end this with quantifying what I'm saying, right, and qualifying what I'm saying. If you're a nerd, you're just a nerd, right? If you're black and a nerd, even black people have to make sure they know you're a blurred. You have to be a blurred. There's a whole convention about it because it's othering to just say nerd somehow, right? The white people get to do things at the default. Like if you're a sellout, you're just a sellout if you're white. If you're a black sellout, you have to find a way. Like FD, you think about it. FD is making sure that like, hey, you can't do this thing because it disparages other black people. But FD made a video about how black love shouldn't be qualified in the sense as it is in the he says like the fabric of white supremacy, like supremacy, like nuclear families, X, Y, and Z. Even though he himself has a wife and kids, he enjoys a nuclear family. He lives in the blackest state or blackest city in America, you know, and he's making bread off of it. I'm sure he's enjoying his life to a level and standard that he wouldn't be able to if he weren't capitalizing off the black trauma that he's talking about, right? But he doesn't have the burden of black excellence because since he's a leftist, he gets to disguise everything he says as, well, if I'm doing it, I'm defying the patriarchy, even if I'm benefiting from the patriarchy as it stands, and I don't have to be honest about that because that's not my problem. That's not my bag. But other people's bag has to be how they affect the black community. I just always found that interesting. That's one of the not even problems I have with FD Signifier. It's just one of the things that, hey, you know, someday I may meet him and be able to like, you know, we may be able to schedule like a talk where I ask him actual questions that he doesn't dodge, you know, like he did with old boy. But you know, I mean, I'm always gonna enjoy his content. Like I know, like I said, if we ever met, he'd be like, "Hey, what's up, Coon? I heard you were cooning out there, you know, out and about." And I'd be like, "Man, like, cool. Let's chop it up and let's get to the bottom of it," because he is doing both. He's getting to live the concept of black excellence without having to subscribe to what that means because he's always on the political side that says you need to break down every barrier possible. It's actually awesome, right? Like he gets to do everything that you would want to do. Like he gets to LARP charity, right? Like people who are hyper rich who spend like half a percentage of their riches to help people get to do both. They get to still enjoy their yachts, and then but they also get to have that feeling of helping the less fortunate. You know, so yeah, like I said, you know, we just tuning in to FD. Like I've been wanting to react to some of his stuff for a long time. You know, I love his videos. I love everything he stands for the most part. You're gonna see a lot more of him on my page unless he like blocks me and or whatever as far as that goes. But you know, man, good video. I love it. Thanks for stopping by. Have a great day. One.